Now, if you haven't seen the last episode, please do, as it will set the stage for what we're going to talk about. The Game Boy Color, released 9 years after the original Game Boy. Yep, it was released in 1998. Now, we need to talk a little bit of a brief history about it.
The Game Boy Color started development in 1996 when Nintendo received requests from game developers for a more sophisticated hardware platform. The Game Boy Color also had backwards compatibility with all existing Game Boy software, which makes the system not only the first backwards compatible Nintendo system, but also the first handheld system to be backwards compatible. Interestingly, the Game Boy Color was developed alongside another project called Atlantis, which later became its successor, the Game Boy Advance. Now, apologies to any of my European viewers, but the reason why it uses the English color is because of the 5 colors it launched in: berry, grape, kiwi, dandelion, and teal, which is what I have here. In addition, there was an atomic purple transparent Game Boy Color. Oh man, I forgot about the clear phase.
Well, as you might guess, Game Boy Color plays Game Boy Color. Oh, interestingly, there's actually one I forgot to mention. There was actually a transparent version of the Game Boy Color, released only in Japan. Related to Japan, good stuff. But anyway, let's talk about the system itself.
The Game Boy Color is around 3.1 inches in width, 5.26 inches in height, and 1.08 inches in depth. The processor is the same as the original Game Boy, but it runs at twice its original speed. The Game Boy Color has 32 kilobytes of RAM and 16 kilobytes of VRAM. The screen is a 2.3-inch reflective TFT color LCD, using the same resolution as the original Game Boy. Although this Game Boy Color has been modded with a backlight, hence why the screen looks a bit bigger. The sound uses 2 square wave channels, 1 wave channel and 1 noise channel, along with a mono speaker and stereo headphone jack. We still have the same input buttons on the front, volume dial, aforementioned headphone jack, link cable, and cartridge port for sending original Game Boy cartridges, or these Game Boy Color cartridges. These cartridges are translucent, which makes them look cool, and they will not work on the original Game Boy. In fact, you can't even play them on the green screen ones due to these cartridges lacking a notch. However, there are also black Game Boy cartridges. More on them later. The new addition to this Game Boy Color is the infrared port, which I think was underutilized. Now, I gotta return to the link cable port. It also applies power to accessories like some third-party lights. However, it comes at a cost of draining the battery faster. Speaking of which, the Game Boy Color takes 2 AA batteries.
Okay, now, how does the Game Boy Color compare to the original Game Boy? Well, the first and obvious one is the colored screen. And it's smaller than the original Game Boy, but bigger than the Game Boy Pocket. Anyway, I forgot to mention, this is actually the power adapter. It's in the same location as the Game Boy Pocket. Anyway, now the cartridge port. Now, much like the Pocket, it lacks a little locking notch. I mean, for obvious reasons, it makes sense. But, let's see what they really compare. Let's get our control game, Tetris. I want to see how fast this Game Boy really works. Let me take my smartwatch off. Stopwatch. Okay, turn it on at the same time I shoot. Okay, take 2. I mean, it's obvious Tetris, let's try. It took 16.31 seconds to get to the tile screen. Then you're seeing it on the Game Boy Color. Yeah, it's a bit faster. I mean, different game, different load times. But hey, regardless.
The Game Boy Color can display 56 colors on screen for up to a palette of 32,768. You can play the original Game Boy games on the Color, but they will be presented in the dark green palette. However, you can change the startup colors by pressing the D-pad and or the A or B buttons. Here are the list of possible palettes. Now, Left and D will make it a nostalgic trip. Some of the non-black Game Boy cartridges have special palettes when playing on the Game Boy Color, like Super Mario Land for example. Notice how I said non-black here? Well, these black cartridges are special and take advantage of the Game Boy Color's enhanced color. While these can be played on the original Game Boy, when playing on the Game Boy Color, the game is presented in full color. Oh, I forgot to mention this, but there are some cartridges with built-in rumble motors, hence why they look unusual. These cartridges require one AAA battery to work, like the Stars Racer game I have.
You know, it's kind of funny how Nintendo went to the trouble of putting this little notch on the Rumble Pack cartridges, even though majority of them are Game Boy Color only games. Now, the only two dual mode Rumble Packs I can know of are Pokemon Pinball, probably the most well-known one, and Test Drive Off-Road 3, which, funny enough, I actually found out about prior to recording the facing camera scenes for this episode and the previous one. Now, speaking of which, why don't we try to play a Game Boy Color only game on the original Game Boy? I mean, for rather obvious reasons, it won't work on the brick due to the little sliding plastic. But what about the Game Boy Pocket? Well, Nintendo thought of that, and every time I try to play a Game Boy Color only game on the Pocket, an error message will pop up. Persuading you to buy new hardware. Yeah. Nintendo will do the opposite with the DS. Well, DS games won't have notch, 3DS games will, and they won't fit in the original DS slot. Now, what about the accessories? Well, there's not that many known accessories. I mean, the most known ones are some third-party lights that use this link cable port, which, like I said before, drains your battery faster. Another accessory is a sewing machine with its own cartridge, different patterns. Yeah, that's a good accessory. And there's also those shoes that you put a Game Boy Color in. It's kind of silly because you might accidentally step on their game system. However, the only notable accessory is the mobile adapter, which was released only in Japan. It allows you to connect your Game Boy to a dial-up to download some content for some games, like I said, only in Japan. The most notable game to take advantage of it was Mobile Golf. And the reason I brought it up because it was actually the final game to feature the character performance Spike Rekuku. Well, for nearly 23 years. Glad that didn't take long because time for the gameplay scenes. Now note, I'll be trimming them if there isn't any motion besides the shadows. So if you notice any weird cuts, you don't know why. Alright, let's start with a Game Boy Color unique game, Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. Now, this one is a enhanced version of Super Mario Bros. Released in the NES 14 years prior. Now, Super Mario Bros. Deluxe is the precursor to the Super Mario Advance series for Game Boy Advance, and Super Mario 64 DS for the, you guessed it, Nintendo DS. And then it all serves as the base for new Super Mario Bros. And we all know how the series is fucked up after that. Which means you can trace new Super Mario Bros. Oh, wait. I should say, which means you can trace the new Super Mario Bros. Series all the way back to Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. Now, this one is an enhanced, play are the original, some challenges, unlock, or versus game. And there's other things, like You vs. Boo, one really interesting ones. And you can unlock an additional version of Super Mario Bros. Deluxe that was called Super Mario Bros. For Super Players. It's slightly modified. There's also a toy box mode. There's a calendar, fortune telling. Ugh. And Yoshi, and this one. In fact, if you beat the game, spoiler alert, you can actually change the title screen music. Anyway, let me show you challenge mode. Now, it's good for getting high scores. Let's start with 1-1. I know I was got medals, but let's try it out. Now, you notice the screen is a bit zoomed in. It means you can actually backtrack for a bit. Making this the first Super Mario Bros. Port to have the screen scroll backwards. And the only time, though briefly. Ah, bonus room. Now let's go. Scores. I know it's like go coins, but I don't want this to become a two-parter again. Which we all know how to. Alright. Stage clear. Now, I didn't get all 5 coins. This is because I already got all 3 medals before. Never sure what they really changed. Press the select button, you can actually switch Luigi. This time, he actually uses a proper green palette instead of being a palette swap of Mario, which looks like a fire form. Now, speaking of which, his fire form uses his original NES cards. Yeah. Now, this is actually one used for the infrared port, where you can actually transfer things to your friends, yeah. And I think that's all I want to show you. Oh, and the album. I should show you the album for a bit. Actually, look, pictures. You got your printout if you have the Game Boy printer. Yeah, I don't have it yet. Anyway, next game. So this is a dual mode game. Game & Watch Gallery 3. Released. This is actually the 3rd game in the Game & Watch series, or 4th if you're from Europe. And let me show you. This one has 10 games. 5 default and 5 to unlock. Should I play a game? Now, this one includes Egg, Greenhouse, Turbo Bridge, Mario Bros, Donkey Kong Jr., Air 5 or Classic are Flagman, Judge, Lion Tail Target, and Donkey Kong 2. Yeah. I mean, let me show you Mario Brothers. Because you may assume that it's based on the arcade game. Well, quite the opposite. The Game & Watch version came out way before the arcade game. So the gameplay looks different. Let me show you the modern mode. Now this one, unlike the classic version, it involves cakes, and Bowser up there is really a big threat. Should play a little bit of it. Alright. Oh, and that's Wario over there. Funny how he never appeared in the first Game & Watch Gallery game. Oh. Oh. Sorry. Mining interruption. Okay. Oh, sorry. Well, it's been 3 minutes already. I showed you enough. So, let's go to the next game. This is a Rumble Pack game, the only one I have. Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. Now, this one is a top-down racing game. Ooh, that 8-bit rendition of Duel of the Fates. Anyway, this one's a top-down racer compared to it's like a kart racer. Let's pick, obviously, the chosen one, Anakin. Let's try his home planet of Tatooine. Okay. Give you. Now I can go to Rumble. There. Alright. Well, there's no music during gameplay, other than the engine sounds. Which is a shame too, because I don't want to hear Duel of the Fates while doing this. Because that 8-bit rendition is actually totally awesome. Okay. Oh! Man, that was a close one! No! Dang it! Well, next game. Anyway, this is SpongeBob's Legend of Lost Spatula. This is the first SpongeBob game, believe it or not. Released on the Game Boy Color. Way before the Game Boy Advance was released, believe it or not. And by way, I meant a few months. Well, in the US at least. Now, it's one is an action game. Now, you may think jump is A and attack is B, but it's the opposite. B is jump and A is action. It will get you a lot. I believe, it reminds me of how Alex Kidd works. Oh shoot, it's Bubble Bass. Yodi. I'll take a double triple bossy deluxe on the rat 4x4 animal style. Extra shimmy and squeeze. And can fry, burn, and let swim. The bow attack is can only stun enemies. There's Mr. Krabs. Now, as you can tell, you gotta get the golden spatula from the Flying Dutchman. In the nude! Wow, don't say that in public. Let me switch to mine. There's Merman. Oh, there's Mrs. Pup. Yeah, she'll give you the Hollow Monitor, which actually gives you additional hit. Ah, yes, Goo Goo. And I think I'll skip to the next game, because that's a little bit... Somebody once told me that I'm on an 8-bit handheld way before the Xbox game. Yep, this is Shrek Fairy Tale Freakdown, the first Shrek game that predates the Xbox game that is known for use from deferred shading. And yes, this is Game Boy Color. Now, it was released a month before the Game Boy Advance was able to hit store shelves, well in the US at least, as it was out in Japan by the time this game came out. Anyway, it's a fighting game, and it has a password system. Champion. Somebody once told me that I'm... It's a fighting game. Fine with it. Yeah, that was a quick fight. The ogre won. The village? Against Pinocchio? Mashing the B button. Now this is fight against Shinji, which always gets... This Shinji fight always is... Yeah, this Gingy fight is the one the hardest. Whoever designed this game must have liked to make it red. Let's face it, there are better Shrek games out there, especially the ones by Activision. Get that tough now out of my way! This is Pac-Man Special Color Edition. This one contains both Pac-Man and Pac-Attack, and this is the only other dual mode cartridge I'll be showing. Yeah, let me show you Pac-Man. Anyway, this one is kind of based on Game Boy port, but with color, as you might say. Zoomed in compared to... This is actually more of a design compromise. Let's see. Nom! Nom! Yes! 16! Man, the 16 go... Oh! Ugh. Ugh. Notice how never go to the ghost base when you're attempting a ghost. And finally, the last game I'm going to be showing here is Donkey Kong Country for the Game Boy Color. Wait, Donkey Kong Country got ported to Game Boy Color? Yeah! This one has a lot of changes. The menu is based off Donkey Kong 64. And now there's only one Kong time a la Donkey Kong Land. You switch it on with the select button. And you now save at any time, which I discovered that the hard way, as well they had to change Candy Kong's minigame. The save point for Candy Kong, to be exact. The menu's based off Donkey Kong 64, which I think I mentioned before, I believe. But the reason why I showed it here is the commercial! If those models look familiar in a commercial, those are actually the same ones used in the Donkey Kong Country television show! Although DK has intense fur textures. Anyway, let me show you Minecart Carnage. Dagon. Oh, I missed the O! Ugh! A bottomless pit. Oh, got the K? Yes, got the O! You know, this got me thinking. I'm aware that V-Smile game Scooter Final Fantasy, the roller coaster section is actually based off of this Minecart Carnage from Donkey Kong Country. Then again, the V-Smile actually had a game where it stole music from Legend of Zelda, so that's pretty a bad comparison. Now returns one crash, one death. Just return crown lanes. As long as you kick. No! This is gonna be long anyway, since the majority of this episode has been mainly about the Game Boy Color itself. guess that's it for the gameplay scenes. Anyway, that's it for both the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. Now, what about the system's discontinuation?
As the old saying goes, all good things must come to an end. Both the original Game Boy and Game Boy Color were discontinued in 2003. 2 years after Game Boy Advance came out and a year before the DS comes out. As I mentioned in the last episode, the Game Boy and Color sold a combined 118.69 million units, making them the 4th best-selling console of all time. The last standard original Game Boy game to be released was Pokemon Yellow Special Pikachu Edition. Notice I said standard original because the last dual-mode Game Boy game to be released was Shogi 3, but only in Japan. The last unique Game Boy Color game to be released was Doraemon no Study Boy Kanji Yokai Master, only in Japan. Now, I hesitate to say this, but the last Game Boy Color game to be released in the US was Harry Potter and Chamber of Secrets.
Now, before I ask, yes, I know the author of Harry Potter books is not that good, and I'm only bringing up the Chamber of Secrets because that was the final Game Boy Color game to be released in the US, so please excuse that. Now, the Game Boy Advance was still on the market by the time the original Game Boy Color was discontinued, so it was probably for the best. Now, what about playing both Game Boy Color games these days?
There are multiple ways to play both Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. I'll start with the original. Both the gray and black cartridges can be played on all members of the Game Boy family. That includes the Game Boy Advance line except for the Micro. In addition, they can be played on the Super Game Boy add-on for the Super Nintendo. Oh! I forgot to mention that! The Super Game Boy is an add-on for the Super Nintendo that allows you to play Game Boy games on your TV in color. It also lets you use different color palettes and other features. It should be noted that some Game Boy games were designed for the Super Game Boy, like Donkey Kong 94, which was released to coincide with Super Game Boy. If you want to learn more about the Super Game Boy, check out this video by Gaming Historian. Anyway, Game Boy Color games can be played on the Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and Game Boy Advance SP. In addition, both Game Boy and Game Boy Color games can be played on the GameCube with the Game Boy Player add-on. Just recently, Game Boy and Game Boy Color titles are being added to NSO, so unless you prefer the actual Game Boy cartridges, like me, this is a good starting point. Finally, I forgot to write this down, you can play any Game Boy or Game Boy Color game on the Analog Pocket, which is a modern clone of the Game Boy, or more accurately, any handheld game system that uses cartridges.
You know, there's a funny story about Game Boy and Switch Online. On the day before my first set of Game Boy cartridges arrived, which are Kirby's Dream Land and Kirby's Dream Land, as I get the first for obvious reasons, Nintendo announced Game Boy for Switch Online, which, is this a coincidence? I think not. Well, I could have just done that on Nintendo Switch with Game Boy Switch Online, but since Game Boy on Switch Online is still pretty new, as there's currently 11 games on there, so I decided to play around. Plus, for half the games I've shown, there aren't currently available on Game Boy Switch Online, so it's probably for the best. And with that all said and done, say this, the Game Boy started a long legacy. It became the precursor to the Game Boy Advance, the precursor to DS, and then the 3DS, and then the Switch, which means you could trace the Nintendo Switch all the way back to the Game Boy. Alright, that's done. Before I end this video, time to get serious. Did you guys remember DKOldies, that one retro game site? Well, they've come under fire recently for selling broken, refurbished consoles, after some big-name YouTubers like Jacob R and VintageTech called them out. But guess what DKOldies did in response? They blocked them! Ooh, seems harsh. If you think that's bad, wait till you know about the owner. And they've been hiding comments from YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Most likely cover their tracks. And this finally out of the coffin, the owner just wants to make some easy money and harass employees, and tells them his employees only clean the outside of consoles rather than the inside unless something is wrong. And despite the video sale rights, they are obviously lying. So as a result, I will no longer be using that site as my go-to source for retro gaming. And I decided to stick with eBay for time being. And new retro games I called This Is Game Room, which, funny enough, is where I got 7 of the 14 games you saw in this episode and the last episode. Yeah. Now, I know of Lucky games, but I never buy them. From what I heard, they're not really that better. So, unless you want to try This Game Room, please stick with eBay for the time being. Oh, man, that was a mouthful. What's next? Am I going to talk about one of the strangest toys made that look like some sort of device that aliens might use?